Casual, where today we are going to once again continue our division preview series with the NFC South, what we're going to be previewing today. And as usual, before we get into this video, uh, make sure you leave in the comments what you agree with and what you disagree with as well. And also, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and also check out the playlist that will be in the description, the link to it, that has all the division previews we've done so far. And without further ado, we are going to get on into previewing the NFC South. The first team we have is the Carolina Panthers. This is the team I do have finishing last, narrowly, but I do have them finishing last. They did obviously have a very bad season with Bryce Young as a rookie, but they bring in Dave Canales, and I think they are on the rise to have a much better year and slowly get their way back to a good contending team. But let's check out the offense, which in my opinion is the most improved part of this team. So obviously quarterback Bryce Young, rookie last year, had his struggles, but if you really watched the game, you just could tell that he had nothing going for him in terms of what was around him. He had nothing was there to help him win outside of Adam Thielen. But first, we look at the running back room. You have Chuba Hubbard, who had a pretty solid season when he took over for Sanders. He's not like a top tier running back, but he's a quality. If you go the route of having like 2 to 3 really good solid running backs, Chuba's a great guy to have in that. Then you have the rookie Jonathan Brooks, who obviously is coming off that injury, but he was very good at Texas. And having Chuba and Miles Sanders and even Rashad Penny hopefully can allow him to slowly get back to full health before he's needed to be used a lot. So it's a solid running back room. Again, it has just a bunch of good guys. However, the receiver room is where you really look at the improvement here. They bring in Deontay Johnson. Yes, he has his drop issues and maybe his personality issues, but he can get open, and that's what Bryce Young needs. He still has Adam Thielen, who was very good despite his old age. And then they draft Xavier Legette, I think it's pronounced Legette, out of South Carolina, who's just a freak at the receiver position. And I think those three could be very useful. And then you also have Mingo, who we'll see how he can play in year 2. Terrace Marshall probably isn't going to get too much time. And then you have Amir Smith-Marset, who's a good gadget guy. But it's a much improved receiver room. And then you also have Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders, who are quality tight ends. Nothing too special. Sanders could be pretty good down the line, but right now he's just a good tight end. And then the O-line. You have Ike Ekemekwana, who obviously struggled last year. But outside of him, you spend money on Damian Lewis. You have Austin Corbett at center. You spend money at Robert Hunt, and you still have Taylor Moton. It should be... a lot of people said this going into the last year, but this O-line should be much better. Yes, they may have overpaid for guys like Hunt and Lewis, but sometimes you just got to get good players, and they got good players. And I think this offense, as long as Bryce can take that step up, can be very, very, not very good, but it can be good, a good offense. Now, defensively is where they took a hit. They lost Brian Burns. They lost Frankie Louvu. They lost, I believe, Dante Jackson is who they traded away to get Deontay Johnson. They lose Jeremy Chin. They lost a lot. But D-line wise, you still have Derek Brown, who's one of the best D tackles in football, 100 tackles last year. You bring in Jadeveon Clowney, who, despite his old age, is still very productive. And you pair him alongside solid pieces like Ashawn Robinson, Shai Tuttle, DJ Wanham. It's not going to be the best. It'll be a decent run defense D-line, but it won't be the best pass rush. Linebacker-wise, you still have Shaq Thompson, good veteran. I like Josie Jewell, who they picked up. And then their secondary, it's okay. Xavier Woods and Jordan Fuller, I think, is a pretty decent safety duo. But corner-wise, you have J.C. Horn, who, when he's healthy, is one of the best corners in football, in my opinion, as a Panther fan. One of the better. We'll say that, maybe not best, one of the better corners, top 10. He just has to stay healthy. Then outside of him, you have Dane Jackson and Troy Hill, who are quality guys. They're serviceable. You're not excited that you're running them out, but you're not upset that they're on the field. So the defense, I think, will take a slight hit from last year. They still have Everose, their DC, but hopefully the offense can carry them. Two, I have him at a 6-11 record. I have MVP. I wanted to give it to Bryce Young, but you can't deny how good Derrick Brown is and that he is clearly the best player on this team. Offense. So I also gave him Defensive Player of the Year as well. Offensive Player of the Year, I gave it to Deontay Johnson. I think he could have a very good season, being that guy. Like he is, they're gonna target him a lot from what I've heard. And then Rookie of the Year, I gave it to Xavier Legette because I don't know if Brooks and Sanders are gonna play enough to get good stats, but I think Legette will. And I do have them finishing 6-11. Then we get to the third place team. I do have that being the New Orleans Saints. Again, they're a very aging team, very expensive team. We'll see in like 2-3 years who's on this team because it seems like all their core pieces could be gone in like 2 to 3 years. So, but right now they still have all those guys, and it's still a good team. Looking at the offense, Derek Carr is obviously a question mark. How good is Derek Carr still? I don't love Derek Carr. I think he is slightly overhated and underrated at times. People think he's like god awful. I don't think that quite is the case. He's just an okay quarterback. He's better than some guys starting in the league, but he's obviously not in even like the first 3 tiers in my opinion. But around him, you got pretty good talent. Alvin Kamara is obviously one of the better running backs. Chris Olave is a young up and coming receiver who I really like. Rashid Shaheed is a good deep threat gadget type guy. I mean, outside of that, you have Cedric Wilson, A.T. Perry, and Equanimous St. Brown. Not the best. I do like their tight end duo of Jawan Johnson and Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, obviously, the gadget guy that can do a lot. And I don't mind Jawan Johnson as a tight end. Yeah, I think you can argue he maybe is the second best tight end in this division. And then O-line, they spent a lot of resources in or not a lot. They draft Fuaga at tackle, and they still have Ryan Ramczyk, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz. It's still a decent O-line. And the supporting cast is all right with overall all right. Obviously, you have Kamara and Olave, but I think Derek Carr kind of holds this offense back from potentially maybe reaching its potential. But defensively, they are aging, but I still like their defense. They're always going to have a good defense, at least with these guys. You still have Cameron Jordan, who can still produce at his old age. They brought in Chase Young. We'll see how he does. Kind of had a decent start in San Fran and then kind of like took a step back. You have Brian Bresee, who I like at D-tackle. I think he came out of Clemson. I really like Carl Granderson, who they have. I think he might have been my breakout player for the Saints. Their linebacker core is pretty good. You have Pete Werner, who's really good. Demario Davis is still really good despite his age. And Willie Gay is a serviceable linebacker who came over from the Chiefs. And I think it's a very good linebacker core. And then their secondary, arguably, maybe is even better. You have Paulson Adebo, who's a very good corner. Lattimore is still one of the best corners in football. They draft Kool-Aid McKinstry. You still have Tyrann Mathieu. It's a good secondary. It's a good Saints defense. Their defense will be probably above in the top half of the league, but their offense might be more in the 20s. And I do have them finishing with an 8-9 record. 2 games over the Panthers. I do have MVP. Didn't want to give it to Derek Carr. It was either, in my opinion, Olave or Kamara. I did decide to give it to Chris Olave. Feel like he could, despite Derek Carr being his quarterback, I feel like he could have a very good season, him and Garrett Wilson. So I also gave him Offensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's clear that Marshawn Lattimore's the best player on the Saints defense, and I think he'll play like that this year as well. And then Rookie of the Year, I couldn't really see any other rookies that would get enough playing time. It was either Fuaga or Kool-Aid McKinstry, but I decided to go with Fuaga, the tackle. And that leads the Saints, as I mentioned, as an 8-9 record. Second place team, I do have the Bucks. It was obviously either the Bucks or the Falcons. I think consensus is these are the top 2 teams, and the Panthers and Saints are the bottom 2. I decided to go with the Bucks as the 2 seed or the second best team in this division. And when you look at their offense, it's essentially the same as last year. You have Baker still, Rashad White, Mike Evans, Godwin, Palmer, Otten. Their O-line is pretty much the same, except you add Graham Burton, the rookie center, Their offense line is good. You have worse. You have Cody Mauk, Luke Gadecki. It's a good O line. Baker's obviously resurged his career to a very good quarterback. Got paid this year. Offense is pretty much the same. It's gonna be a good offense, and honestly, you could probably make the same case defensively. They really kept a lot of their players together. They have Kalijah Cansey still, who I like. Vita Vea is obviously one of the better nose tackles. He's still on the team. You still have Levante David. You brought him back. Joe Tryon Shoyinka has had a bit of a rough start to his career, but I think he can turn it around potentially this year. And then secondary wise, you pay Antoine Winfield a lot of money, is deserved. You still have Jamel Dean despite losing Sean Murphy Bunting. You have Jordan Whitehead. It'll be a good team. It's pretty much the same team as last time, and I can't remember exactly how many wins they won last year. It might have been around 8 or 9. I do have them finishing with 9 wins this season. MVP, I think Baker Mayfield will play good enough to be the quarterback that wins the MVP for the Bucks. He proved it last year. I don't see why he'll take a step back this year. Offensive Player of the Year, I gave it to Mike Evans. He's Mike Evans. He'll get 1,000 yards and a bunch of touchdowns, and that's pretty much it. Not much to say about Mike Evans. Defensive Player of the Year, they paid him for a reason. I went with Antoine Winfield. It was either him or Vita Vea. I decided to go with Winfield. I think he could have a very good season. And then rookie, just like the Saints, I went with their rookie lineman that they drafted. I went with Graham Barton out of, I believe, Duke for the Rookie of the Year. But that does mean that the best team in the NFC South for me is the Atlanta Falcons. And obviously it starts with their addition of Raheem Morris and Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is the quarterback they bring in. He is coming off of a major injury, and he's old. But before that injury, he was arguably playing MVP level football. So as long as he can recover from that injury, which you're always going to predict, you're not going to predict injuries, they will be a very good offense. They drafted Michael Penix, but that's not really going to come into, as long as Kirk Cousins stays healthy, Michael Penix is going to factor in this year. But outside of Kirk Cousins, you have Bijan Robinson, who's one of the more young, upcoming, one of the more elusive running backs who can really provide both. I think they've said they're going to use him in a McCaffrey type role this year, so he could get a bunch of receiving production as well. And your backup running back, Tyler Algier, is really good as well. And then on the receiver side, I actually like the receiver core. You have Drake London, who hasn't necessarily had the production yet, but he hasn't had the quarterback play either, or the system around him to really get him there, and I think this is when he actually can. You bring in Darnell Mooney from the Bears, who is a good receiver. He'll obviously make his highlight catch every 4 weeks, but he's a good receiver. Rondell Moore, they somehow managed to get Rondell Moore for Desmond Ridder. Don't know how that happened, but you bring Rondell Moore in. It's a decent receiver core. I think Kirk Cousins can work with that. And then tight end, you have Kyle Pitts, who obviously we've yet to see the real Kyle Pitts that was drafted out of Florida, very high in the draft. But I think this is the year we can see a glimpse of the real Kyle Pitts. And then O-line is very good. You still have Jake Matthews. You still have Bergeron, Lindstrom. Like I said, if Kirk Cousins' age and injury doesn't hinder him, it will be a top offense in football, top 10 potentially, in my opinion. And then we move over to the defense, which I don't think will be obviously as good. I don't think this will be a top 10 defense, but it still could be a very good defense. D-line, you still have Grady Jarrett. You still have Anya Mata. Good guys at D-line. Linebacker core, Lorenzo Carter, Caden Ellis, and Troy Anderson. I don't hate it as a linebacker core. I don't think it's by any means the best linebacker core, but I think it's a very quality linebacker core. And then secondary, you have Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. You don't really need much outside of AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. AJ Terrell, arguably top 5 corner in football. Jesse Bates, top 3 safety in football. So it'll be a good defense, maybe in 15 through 19 in terms of ranks amongst the league. And I do have them finishing with an 11-6 record. MVP did give it to Kirk Cousins. He has so much around him. Played MVP football last year. I don't see why he can't do it this year. Uh, Offensive Player of the Year, I gave it to Bijan. It was either him, Pitts, or London. And I think, like I said, I mentioned before, they might use him in like a McCaffrey type role, which is just give him the ball any way possible. And that could lead to a very good season for Bijan. Defensive Player of the Year, I think it was obvious to give it to A.J. Terrell. Could have gave it to Jesse Bates, but I went with A.J. Terrell. And then Rookie of the Year, obviously their first round pick, Michael Penix, isn't probably going to play. So I decided to go with his teammate, Braylon Trice, out of Washington, the edge rusher they took. I didn't talk about him too much when looking at the depth chart, but I like Braylon Trice. There wasn't many rookies for the Falcons that I would see getting enough playing time, and I think Trice is the best that could get the most playing time. So I went with him as for the Falcons' best rookie this season. And that leaves us with the final standings of the Falcons winning the division at an 11-6 record, followed by the Bucs at 9-8, Saints at 8-9, and Panthers at 6-11. And that will, of course, conclude our NFC South preview. Again, as usual, make sure in the comment section letting me know what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, and again, leave a like. Check out the playlist that is linked in the description of all the other division previews, and make sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss more content over here at Couch Casual. But that is it for me, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.